All right, hello everybody. Thank you for tuning in again today. I'm a little bit under the weather, so hopefully that won't affect things too much, and you'll be able to understand me. Um, so today I'll bring you the next evolution of Grixis Delver that I think is maybe a little bit better well positioned in the online metagame. And the change we went for this time, over say the straight Delver of Secrets list from before, is now we added Young Pyromancer. The reason being, Young Pyromancer has a lot of game both against non-interactive decks and interactive decks. In the other straight Delver list, I found that we ran out of threats pretty quickly against the decks that were heavy on removal. And that doesn't say that Young Pyromancer doesn't also die to removal, but it usually nets us at least maybe one or two elementals before it dies. And sometimes you can even protect it with counter magic, and that just allows us to really tax the opponent's removal, especially the hard control decks that can't clog up the ground as well to block the elementals. So that's the reason we're going with Young Pyromancer. The deck felt a little lackluster against the interactive decks of the format, so we're going to try to see if Young Pyromancer can turn that around. Another small change we made, we cut Murderous Cut, and we added a third Fatal Push. I think that in combination with the Young Pyromancer, that's the best line of action. Reason being is that it doesn't tax our graveyard as much, and it's always going to cost one black mana, which is pretty important for Young Pyromancer to have cheap spells that you can cast, in combination with Young Pyromancer on turn 3 or turn 4. So that's the change we made. We also cut the main deck Counter Squall, just because while it was really good in the games where it was good, it was really bad in the games where it just sat in your hand against those heavy creature decks like Zoo, and you just didn't really have anything to do with it. So we went actually for the main deck Electrolyze just for the sake of being a bit more versatile in game 1. And it just adds to the plan of aggression. You can just go straight to the face, draw some cards, keep the gas going, especially against the non-interactive decks. So I think that's the better card overall. I did like the main deck Counter Squall, but like I said, it wasn't great in every game. We're gonna stick with the 3 Tasker, 1 Gurmag Angler split, but I think it's very acceptable to go 2 Tasker, 2 Gurmag Angler. I think it's preference. I like Tasker just because it's lower on the delve cost, and has the activated ability. It just seems a lot more relevant than the extra power for Gurmag Angler. With that said, we're running the same mana base. We're still trying out Spell Pierce. I think Spell Pierce could be pretty good with the Young Pyromancer. Just cheap counter spells, protect it. But I have been really impressed with Mana Leak in some of the games. So it's possible that Spell Pierce should just be a third Mana Leak. Onto the sideboard. We did make a few adjustments here as well. We changed Negate for Counter Squall. There were a lot of arguments before that said Negate is better for the turns that you need to double spell, because blue-black is actually, it's pretty restrictive on, turns where you need to cast 2 black spells and you only have 1 black mana or something like that. And Negate is just blue and colorless, so it's a lot easier to cast when you're trying to cast multiple spells a turn. With that said, I think Counter Squall dealing the 2 extra damage is very relevant against the combo decks where we're trying to counter their stuff while kill them at the same time. So I'm going to still try out Counter Squall, even though Negate might be easier to cast in a lot of games. And then we're also going to go for a change here. We cut 1 Engineered Explosives for a second Is It Staticaster. Now, the reason I'm going 2 Is It Staticasters is because this card can come in so many different matchups, but especially in the Lingering Souls matchup. And we want to be able to kill Lingering Souls tokens without killing our own Young Pyromancer tokens, which Engineered Explosives, it will kill all non-land permanents with converted mana cost of, say, 0. With that said, Engineering Explosives is still really great at dealing with, all different kinds of permanents, creature decks, artifacts, enchantments, all these things that Grixis might have a hard time dealing with in mass amounts. And it's also an answer to Etched Champion, a card that Affinity can present that is actually extremely difficult to deal with. With that said, the rest of the deck has remained relatively the same. We're still running the Ancestral Vision package. I think it's our best way to fight the grindy decks. Fulminator Mage is how we attack the mana decks. Dispel is just another counter spell. Collective Brutality, once again, I have been overwhelmed by how good this card is. It is extremely efficient and versatile. And while it's not card advantage, a lot of the time it just makes the best use of your cards. Like, say, Spell Pierce is a dead card in your hand in the late game, ditch it to Collective Brutality. To add a drain effect to the discard effect. Spell Snare not good in this matchup. Like Eldrazi or something, discard it. So there was a time where I had 2 Collective Brutalities main. I think that's not necessarily the move. One main is fine with another one in the sideboard. Heck, I could see 2 in the sideboard, but I think this is just the safer sideboard, the sideboard that can handle most things. But yeah, that's the list. So we actually ran this exact list in a Modern Competitive League earlier, just to try to see how it plays out, see how it feels. I went 4-1, beating Naya Zoo, Naya Bushwhacker, also beat Elves. There was one other deck, and Grishelbrand, and we lost to Bant Eldrazi. So these Fatal Pushes felt really bad against Bant Eldrazi. While it can deal with Thought-Knot Seer if you crack the fetch or something like that, in general they just felt really poor. So I could definitely see cutting one of these Fatal Pushes for a Murderous Cut, to just handle more of the creatures, the big creatures in the meta. But with that, also with that said, Fatal Push has been really great against the aggressive decks. So it's a bit of a trade-off. And I think going with 3 Fatal Pushes is worth it, but it's hard to say exactly and would warrant more testing. Depends how big Bant Eldrazi and maybe other Delver decks are in the format. Because, killing Tastic or Gurmag Angler is also pretty relevant, as well as something like a Primeval Titan sometimes, which Fatal Push is pretty dead against. So that's definitely an option, maybe -1 Fatal Push, +1 Murderous Cut. That's what we had in our previous lists with Delver, but I think Fatal Push just synergizes a bit more with Young Pyromancer. Less taxing on the graveyard for our Delve threats, and Snapcaster Mage. But that's the list that we have. We're going to try to run it through a Modern Competitive League once more, see if we can produce some good results here. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully we can do well. See you soon.